Okay, so we probably all know this already, but I'm going to recap on some information regarding the Metropolitan Police that's come to light recently. But rather than make multiple videos, which takes time, I'll pop them into this one video to touch on some of the main things that we've heard recently. Now, we know the Met needs to be put into special measures, but as yet that's not been announced. In fact, they need disbanding, but that's not going to happen without a public uprising, so we have to take what we can get. And although the police say they're now going back over complaints made against every serving police to see if they should still be employed, and vetting procedures are said to have been improved, except the Met Police, who funnily enough have not held face-to-face interviews since COVID and have failed to reinstate them even though other forces have, it's now been said that recruitment should be suspended across the country whilst they root out corruption. Yes, police have allegedly been facing calls from charity groups and civil rights groups to cease recruitment until women can trust police again. I mean, that simply means no more new cops ever, to be fair. But more importantly, why is everyone so hung up on women trusting the police? We should all be able to trust the police, and we should all want things to change, not just women. But press reports are all claiming it's for women's safety and women's trust in the police. You know, fuck the men, let's just let them deal with the tosspots while women get treated all nicey-nicey. I don't think so. Mandu Reid of the Women's Equality Party has said we are supposed to have to police by consent, and we can't consent if there is no trust. So this has gone way too far. I personally feel the women can't trust police. Now, unfortunately, I think you need to update your definition of consent then, Mandu. No one's consented for years on a personal level, hence why we have elected MPs who, although are supposed to listen to their constituents and pass their constituents' consent and fears, etc. to the government, we've been left with people in these positions who will do what's best for them and not for us. Ergo, we have not been policed by consent for a long time. Ms Reid and the Women's Equality Party are calling for a change in the recruitment process of police in the UK, but say that it must be suspended to allow women to have trust again. She also called on Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, to step forward and have the courage to say no more recruiting, adding that not doing so will only result in more cases like David Carrick. She said we need them to stop ducking and diving, and we need them to face up to the problem and remember that they exist to protect and serve. Yes, men and women. These comments come after Mark Jones, chairman of the Association of Police and Chief... These comments come after Mark Jones, chairman of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, stated that vetting should be taken out of the hands of the forces and carried out by an independent body to stop rogue officers slipping through the net, and said the idea needs to be explored whilst reforms are considered in the wake of David Carrick and the series of other scandals that have plunged the police service into major crisis. Mark Jones, who gets paid a lot of money for doing not a lot in Lincolnshire, said that policing has a huge amount of work to do to get its house in order, and there will be story after story while that happens, but that's a process they've got to go through. Explaining why he thinks vetting should be done by an independent organisation, he said vetting was vital for hiring and keeping the right people in policing, arguing that this should not be handled individually by each of the 43 police forces in England and Wales. He said, I just don't accept that every single police force in this country has to do it itself, and I think that will create a massive amount of variation. So I think we need to just look at the system and say, can we do it better, more efficiently, more effectively, and provide an additional level of confidence to the public that this has been done right. So what are you actually expecting, Mark? Bringing in one of the facilities companies such as G4S or Serco to do the vetting, because they're no more independent than the police are, seeing as they rely on government contracts worth billions of pounds, and they wouldn't want to see that income lost. We also see the types of people these companies hire as security guard, which, in all fairness, is still a higher calibre of person than many police are, but it's still not what I would call an independent agency. I agree that something needs to be done, but outsourcing it means that people's personal and private information will then be shared with companies that are out to make a profit. By which I mean, when someone applies to the police have the resources to thoroughly check a person on multiple databases, which they have clearly been overlooking, but outsourcing it means that private companies will have access to that data, the data that only police should have, and that's a bad thing, even if we are talking about the police. But then again, maybe forces have been outsourcing their recruitment needs already. Maybe this is why there have been reports of functionally illiterate English speakers being hired by the Metropolitan Police, allegedly to improve with diversity. I mean, if you're more concerned about diversity than people who can do the job, then I suggest putting your employment adverts in the Ugandan Telegraph. Then, when you have enough applicants, ship on them over, give them a uniform and send them out on the streets. I mean, there has to be a line between diversity hiring and those who can do the fucking job that they're hired to do. And so far, it seems that recruitment is way below that line. Even His Majesty's Inspector of Constabularies, Matt Parr, said that while it was entirely noble and right that Scotland Yard was aiming to be more representative of the communities it policed, it should not be at the expense of standards. This comes after ex-Commissioner Cressida Dick said she wanted 40% of the Metropolitan Police to be black and ethnic officers by 2023. And whilst I don't disagree that police forces should be made up of a variety of cultures, they should all at least be able to speak and write the language of the laws that they're trying to enforce. If they can't speak or write it, then how can we be sure they can read it and understand it? Matt Parr said that there was even anecdotal evidence that some applicants were being accepted even though they were functionally illiterate in English and had difficulty writing up crime reports, adding, "We completely support the idea that London, which will likely be a minority white city in the next decade or so, should not be policed by an overwhelmingly white police force." Wait, what? He said, Matt Parr said, this is Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabularies, said that London, which will likely be a minority white city in the next decade or so. Haven't people been saying that for a long time, getting called racist for saying it? Anyway, I digress. He said that is clearly wrong. It is not just wrong from a legitimacy point of view and from an appearances point of view, it is also operationally wrong because it means that the Met does not get insight into some of the communities it polices, and that has caused problems in the past. So we completely support the drive to make the Met much more representative of the communities it serves than it is at the moment. But we have a risk of recruiting the wrong people. You will hear people from their training school say that they are taking a significant number of people who are, on paper at least, functionally illiterate in English, and therefore just writing up crime reports has become quite difficult in some areas. So in that drive, there is at least anecdotal evidence that they have lowered standards. Before I continue, let me just say something that some of you will probably call racist. People are moaning at the moment that there's not enough black people or BAME people in the Metropolitan Police or in any police forces to reflect the diversity in those communities. Now, if London is going to be a minority white city in the next decade or so, does that mean that we're all allowed to kick off and say that the police are being racist when they start arresting white people and the police are generally black or BAME? Interesting question, legitimate question. I'm honestly asking, what do people think? If people at the moment, if black people, minority people at the moment are complaining about white coppers arresting them and treating them badly, which some of them do, absolutely, and then moaning that there's not enough BAME officers, when that flips in a decade's time, does that mean that we white people are allowed to make as much fuss as the current black people because there's going to be more black people policing the community in London? Matt Parr has even said that there was a widespread and historic problem of failing to adequately assess new recruits and that policing has smelt the coffee and woken up to the scale of the problem in the wake of recent scandals, but yet are still trying to put a band-aid on a severed fucking artery. He said, when we reported back in November about vetting across the country, we looked at hundreds of officers that had joined the police. About 10% of them should not have got through vetting. That was not a random sample. These are cases we had highlighted, but a significant number of officers joined the police that, in our view, should not have done. I don't accept that the new 20,000 officers can be used as an excuse for lowering standards of the people that join. Now, as you already know from previous reports, Mark Rowley, Commissioner of the Met, said that the London Assembly last week that 2 to 3 police officers each week are up on criminal charges. Not misconduct, but criminal charges, and that he fears that more will come to surface in the coming weeks and months. Now, as I've said before, if this was a business, a company in the private sector with so many issues, they would have been shut down. But because the police have been allowed to run rampant for so long and have been embellished with so much power and authority over people, they simply think that they can get away with anything they like, and they invariably do. This is a very dark time for British policing, once the envy of policing across the world. I'm asking myself now, if such an institution has been left to rot for so long as to be in the state it's in, then what of the other great British institutions, such as the general legal system and the government? Rhetorical question, by the way.